We are a coalition fighting today on World Press Freedom Day to stop the murder of Palestinian journalists and their families and stop the U.S. military and economic aid to Israel. These are crimes that have to be stopped, and people in this country have to stand with the Palestinian people. Hands off the Palestinians!
Hands off the Palestinians!
Hands off the journalists!
Hands off the journalists!
Stop U.S. aid to Israel!
Stop U.S. aid to Israel!
Stop the murder of Palestinian journalists! Human rights and press rights for all workers!
Human rights and press rights for all workers!
Stop the media blockade!
Stop the media blockade!
We're here today on World Press Freedom Day to speak and remember the journalists and their families who've been attacked and killed by the Israelis, the apartheid regime, the racist regime in Israel. Over 180 journalists have been killed, and their families, many family members have been killed by the U.S.-supported Israeli IDF. Today is World Press Freedom Day, and journalists all over the world, not only in Palestine, but even in the United States, are being attacked. Mumia Abu Jamal is a journalist. That's one of the reasons he is in jail today. Mumia spoke truth about the oppression of the black people in this country, about the discrimination and the racist attacks by the Philadelphia police. He's still in prison today. He's a political prisoner. But there are journalists all over the world who are fighting to get the information out, to get the truth out, and they're being attacked. In fact, President Trump, in his first administration, called journalists scum. Those are the words of a fascist, to call journalists scum. So we have a real problem in this country with the protection of democracy, protection of democratic rights, the protection of journalists. And this is an international struggle. This is an international day to defend the journalists in Palestine, to defend the journalists all over the world. And our first speaker is going to be Cedric from the National Writers Union. And he's going to be, the National Writers Union represents writers throughout the United States. This union actually has been forthright in defending the Palestinian workers and the Palestinian journalists and against the oppression that they face. So welcome, Cedric.
All right, greetings, y'all. I didn't know I was speaking today. I thought somebody else might be here from the National Writers Union. But our union, yes, like Steve said, has been on the forefront working with the International Association, the International Palestinian Journalist Syndicate. And I just like to say thank you everybody for coming out here. And we definitely have, as you can see, a big struggle on our hands. We got to let people know what's happening. We need the numbers that we see across the street out here today. And we got to build a movement because things are getting worse. I'm actually part of the Freelance Solidarity Committee, and which is pretty amazing to me. Unlike a lot of unions, our union was able to bring together a lot of freelance workers because a lot of workers are being forced to the gig economy. We're not able to participate in the traditional union framework. So the National Writers Union was able to bring in independent journalists, and we were able to come together to fight with the unions for journalist rights. And that's something we need to really support. If you know of other independent journalists or independent media creators that are looking for an organization that fights for workers' rights, the National Writers Union is an organization that I think you should look up. I have some information if you're interested in being a part of the National Writers Union and organizing for labor rights for gig workers. Come talk to me. Let's do it.
This is an international day. It's World Press Freedom Day. And it's a struggle today in the world to defend journalists. The journalists who speak out about the crimes of the United States and Israel are being fired from their jobs. They're being harassed and intimidated. And also at the University of California, there's a campaign to attack workers who speak out for Palestine. This is an attack on democratic rights, and it's an attack on workers' rights. So our next speaker is Elizabeth Milos, who's a member of UPTE, a rank-and-file member of UPTE, CWA. My union is the Pacific Media Workers Guild of the Newspaper Guild, and we're fighting in that union for the union to take a strong stand to defend Palestinian journalists and to stop the murder and bombing of journalists and their family. Journalists are not only being targeted, but their families are being targeted, and their homes are being bombed with U.S. U.S.-paid bombs, with U.S.-made bombs. Our bombs in the United States are bombing journalists and people of Palestine. Stop it. Stop the bombing.
Stop the bombing.
Stop the bombing. Stop the bombing. Stop the bombing. Stop the bombing. Defend Palestinian journalists. Defend Palestinian journalists. So these crimes of the United States and Israel have to be fought, and working people, the unions, have the power to stop it. There can be an international labor blockade of ports and others against the attack on the journalists in Palestine and the working people of Palestine. So our next speaker is Elizabeth Milos. She's also with UPTE for Palestine. Welcome, Lisa.
I belong to the University of Professional and Technical Employees, CWA, and it's a statewide healthcare and education worker union that's part of the National Communication Workers of America. And the Communication Workers of America has, like Steve mentioned, has the News Guild, also the healthcare and education worker sector, as well as the IT sector. And this is important. Why? Well, there was members of the IT sector within CWA that were fired, about 50 members that were fired because they refused and they called out these IT companies that are here in California. They're actually helping to create the software such as Palantir software and other like Where's Daddy software that targets journalists in Gaza directly, not only while they're actually doing their work as journalists, but also they track them home and bomb them in their homes with their entire families. There's been more than 200 people, 200 journalists that have been killed, Gaza journalists as well as journalists from the surrounding Middle East area that have been there and have been also in Lebanon as well by Israel. Now, there's also been an internal struggle within the movement regarding Pacifica Network. And Pacifica Network has 5 stations. It was founded in the 1940s as a pacifist station. And its mission is to present news that no other places could present, no other places presented. But there's been an internal struggle such that there are people within the progressive left, within KPFA, for example, that refuse to approve a resolution on Palestine. Not once, but twice. This is very serious. There's also this major takeover by sectors of the Democratic Party that are trying to take over Pacifica and turn it into a NPR. But let me tell you something. There's not going to be any more NPR or CBS or anything like that. If people within these environments in the Democratic Party think that they can shut down our voices, they're ending up shutting up themselves as well. Last Thursday, the Trump administration approved an executive order to take away the funding of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and of NPR. So, by attacking us, they're actually making us all more weak to confront fascism. Right now, these same sectors have taken over Pacifica Network and are trying to impose bylaws that turns them into self-selected or self-designated boards and taking away the working staff, the unpaid and paid staff rights that they had under the bylaws that we actually have, which allows for staff representation. How can they claim to represent free speech when they're taking away the rights of staff members who are producing 70% of the work, the unpaid staff, volunteer staff, at Pacifica? We're talking about 5 stations here: KPFA, KPFT in Houston, WBAI in New York, KPFW in Washington, D.C., and KPFK in L.A. All of these stations are in danger of losing themselves, basically, to this onslaught, internal onslaught. Let's talk about due process. We're all very angry at the lack of due process of the Trump administration, but what happens to due process when people within the elected listener station boards get suspended with sham kangaroo trials without any due process, and we get removed from those boards, from the elected boards? Both I and Steve were removed from the KPFA listener station boards. When we talk about Gaza, and we talk about freedom for Gaza and for Palestine, and we talk about defending the journalists, and we're talking about World Press Day, we need to look at home and practice what we preach and defend Gaza and defend Palestine and defend it fiercely. This progressive, so-called progressive stance of progressives except for Palestine has inundated and completely taken over. In CWA for Palestine, when I was trying to get them to endorse demonstrations that were going on, there was members on that were saying, no, we can't do that. No, let's try the internal route. Let's try to talk with the leadership of CWA News Guild to try to get them to be more open to defend Palestine. Yeah, the News Guild did pass a resolution, I believe, but I don't see it published anywhere. The only organization that has actually come out in a systematic way to defend Palestinian journalists as a campaign has been the National Writers Union among the journalist organizations. The only organization among the journalist organizations that have come out in the U.S. has been the National Writers Union. Journalists from around the world are looking at the U.S. and looking at the CWA News Guild and wondering what the hell is going on. We've allowed the New York Times, we've allowed the Washington Post, we've allowed the LA Times, we've allowed all those editors to create a narrative that continues to this day where they're still calling it a war when it's not a goddamn war, it's fucking genocide. They are starving 2 million people to death. There's no aid that has entered into Gaza. But before then, before October 7th, on October 6th, they were starving, slowly starving Gazans as well. They were not allowing anything. They were restricting calories. They were bombing 5 different times, 6 different times. A 17-year-old child in Gaza has experienced more friggin' bombings than any kind of veteran in the U.S. They've been bombed more than 6 times during their entire lives. How is this possible? It's not only our tax money that's going there, it's our pension funds. That's why the university students were fighting. They're fighting to divest from Israeli bonds.
That's right, that's right.
They were fighting for that, and they're being expelled, the students. At UCSF, I was threatened with termination for wearing a keffiyeh at work. We have a doctor, Dr. Rupa Myra, who's being suspended because she was concerned about IDF people coming back to work at UCSF. People who may have committed genocide. There's no vetting going on. At UCSF, the Helen Diller Foundation is its major contributor. That foundation also contributes to Canary Mission, setting the narrative that is picked up by the New York Times, that is picked up by all of these fascist newspapers, and now they're all claiming that they're worried because of Trump. They were doing the same damn shit throughout all these years, trying to silence Palestinian voices. But now they can't, because young people, especially young union members, are coming out and they're realizing that this cannot stand. That is what is happening in Gaza can happen to anybody else. And this is fascism, and we all need to fight together. We cannot erase each other just because we might have different opinions about what we need to do. We're calling for a general strike, and that's what has to happen in this country, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to defeat fascism. And that's what it is. Let's call it what it is. It's fascism and Zionism. And Zionism is racism. It has nothing to do with being Jewish. In fact, that in itself is offensive. The Jewish religion has nothing to do with killing people. It's the Zionists that do it. That's a political ideology that's taken control over Europe, over the US. It has nothing to do with being Jewish. So let's stand together and let's fight against this fascism. And the best way to do that is to make sure that people have the information. And please, contact Pacifica Network and tell them to stop trying to change bylaws and stop trying to destroy the last remaining terrestrial radio station, independent, listener-sponsored radio network in the country is Pacifica Network. We need to stop this bullshit. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Stop murdering Palestinian journalists. Stop murdering Palestinian journalists.
Stop murdering Palestinian journalists.
Stop U.S. aid to Israel.
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 Hands off the people of Palestine.
Hands off the people of Palestine.
Hands off the journalists.
Hands off the journalists.
Stop murdering journalists and their family in Palestine.
Stop murdering journalists and their families in Palestine.
Stop U.S. aid to Israel.
Stop U.S. aid to Israel.
So our next speaker is Andrew from the DSA in San Francisco. The DSA has taken a strong stand for Palestinians who are active for divestment and for ending U.S. aid to Israel. Welcome, Andrew.
Hi, so today marks World Press Freedom Day. Since October 7th, Gaza has become the deadliest place in the world for journalists. Over a year and a half into Israel's genocidal campaign in Gaza and ethnic cleansing of the West Bank, we commemorate the loss of 180 Palestinian journalists. Brave individuals like 25-year-old photojournalist Fatima Hassouna risk their lives every day to document atrocities committed by Israel against the Palestinian people. Before her untimely death and the death of her family, including her sister who was pregnant, Hassouna was quoted as saying, "If I die, I want a loud death. I don't want to be breaking news or a number in a group. I want a death that the world will hear, an impact that will remain through time, and a timeless image that cannot be buried by time or place." So today we hear her death. Israel has deliberately assassinated many journalists in Gaza while barring foreign journalists from entering Gaza and jailing Palestinian journalists from the occupied territories. We hear the loud voice of Fatima Hassouna and all journalists on the front lines of history in Palestine, in the United States, and around the world. In an age of rising fascism, the DSA San Francisco chapter believes freedom of the press is essential to countering fascism around the world. We are proud to stand in solidarity with the journalists who risk their lives every day to expose the truth that Israel and other fascist authoritarian regimes seek to hide. Press freedom is essential to elevating the plight of working class people here at home. So we are proud to join the National Writers Union, Workweek, UPTE Members For Palestine, the United Front Committee for Labor Party, and Pacifica Fight Back to take part in World Press Freedom Day. A better world is possible. Let us start to realize that world by building bridges of solidarity with our journalists, comrades in Palestine. Free Palestine and hands off Palestinian journalists. Thank you.
Our next speaker has been a longtime fighter for the Palestinian people, and he organized a committee in the United States called Labor Committee on the Middle East. He formed a bulletin, labor bulletin in the Middle East, to educate workers about the role of our unions. Unfortunately, the AFL-CIO leadership are Zionists. They want us to buy bonds using money from our unions. We have to challenge this, and Jeff Blankford has been active. He's a journalist himself, a photographer and journalist, in educating U.S. workers in the fight to defend Palestine. Welcome, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Steve. Free not only Palestinian journalists, free Palestine, free the Middle East, free the world from Israel, this genocidal country that has been practicing genocide as the first war crime of post-World War II. People studying the history of that would find out the collaboration between the Zionists and the Nazis was essential to build the Jewish state, which now is arguably committing the ugliest war crime visible in human history. Because we have had terrible war crimes, Holocaust, the people of Congo, which you don't even study about in their school, in the 1880s, over 10 million were brutally slaughtered by the Belgian Congo King Leopold, supported by the United States, Britain, and France, all these imperialist countries, which we were supporting in both world wars. Here we had the French imperialists, the British imperialists, and the growing American imperialists. And they were the good guys, we're told in our public schools. We have been lied to and lied to and lied to. Our whole educational system, which I've been a part of myself, tells lies about human history, American history. And thank you, Cosme. My introduction to Palestine goes back to when Israel became a state, and my parents were the only ones who were not Zionists among their friends, and they lost all their friends who weren't Zionists. They were left. They weren't Zionists before the war, but the Holocaust made them into Zionists. And my parents' position was Israel should be Palestine should be a state for all the people who live there. Now I don't agree with that. It should be a state for the Palestinians, and all those settlers should go back to where they came from. I mean, the idea that we're talking about two states after Israel's committing this incredible war, and I have been there to see it. In fact, as a journalist and photographer in 1983, while taking a picture of a bridge across the Awali River in Lebanon, where the Palestinian or the Lebanese, well, everyone in Lebanon was being collectively punished because the people fighting for Lebanon, nobody's proxies, Hezbollah, had blown up the intelligence headquarters of the Israeli Defense Forces in southern Lebanon. And Israel, which is a long-time champion of collective punishment, was punishing the people of Lebanon by closing the one highway between the south and the north at the Awali River. And I went down there with two other journalists, and the trucks and cars had been backed up for days. Excuse me. All the vegetables were rotting in the trucks. People could not turn around. There was a big roll of concertina wire, and at the end of which was an Israeli tank. And I saw up in the toll gates was a picture, it was an Israeli flag, a flag of Lebanon, and a Mobil oil flag. And I decided I wanted to take a picture. So I walked around this big roll of concertina wire in front of the Israeli tank and took a photograph. And the next thing I know, I feel something creasing my hair, and then I hear the shot. I was not intimidated. I took out my long lens to take another picture of two Israeli soldiers with US M14s coming towards me, and then I decided I better get out of there. And I walked back around in front of the tank and back behind the line. Now that bullet, I don't know where it went, but it could have killed, besides me, somebody else who was standing behind the line. I happen to have been in the Army, I should say, in 57 to 59, the only person in the U.S. Army who had not signed a loyalty oath, and I was drafted by mistake, but because I had sworn to be in the Army, catch-22, they couldn't send me home. So I was at Fort Ord for 2 years, Army hospital and so on. But I know I know a lot of folks who were in the war. I work with Vietnam vets, but I'll tell you that what's happening today will be remembered more for what the Israelis and the U.S. enablers have done to Palestine than the election of Donald Trump. We think Trump is the face of fascism, and he certainly is. We should start calling ICE the Gestapo, because that's what they are. But the reality is what the whole world has seen, and Americans, but less so, has been the worst, for me, the ugliest event in human history, because so many humans have seen it. We didn't see what was happening in the Congo. We didn't see what was happening in the concentration camps. But everyone has seen this. But we don't see here, for example, as I saw on a video the other day, thousands of people marching in Sweden against the genocide in Gaza. It's not even reported here by the mainstream press. It's not reported by Pacifica, which I dealt with for years, being an initiator of something called Take Back KPFA back in 1992. When Pacifica was starting to move to become an NPR, and they were unfortunately doing it with the assistance of people who had been in the U.S. Communist Party, as I had been. And what I saw was the so-called progressive left looking the other direction as Pacifica was being taken over. What we needed to do then was protest, and we did. I ended up going back to the CPB in 1997 to testify against Pacifica's violation of all the regulations of the CPB for local radio stations. And who was opposing me? Supported by the CPB was Jack Odell, who had been a confidant of Martin Luther King, and because of his communist connections had to leave the King campaign. And there is the CPB supporting Jack Odell, who was defending Pacifica against those who wanted to keep it as a community radio station, which it was at the time. Now, I want to talk about the Palestinian journalists because their deaths are really important. Actually, the number as of last night was 232. 232 journalists. They had to be killed so they could not report more about the genocide. And the one thing most Americans don't know is that mainstream journalists, mainstream reporters from the Western press, America, England, France, and so on, have not been allowed to go into Gaza. They don't talk about that anymore, but there was one ad I saw in the New York Times in which they were protesting early on. Now, the fact that American journalists cannot go to Gaza to report on what's seen, and NPR has somebody in Dubai or somebody in Israel reporting, but no American journalist has been allowed to go there. And why not? Because Americans might object to a Palestinian, American journalist being killed, where they don't really care about a Palestinian journalist. In May of 2022, a woman named Shireen Abu Nakla, who is a journalist, an American citizen as well, who was a journalist for Al Jazeera, was shot and killed deliberately. The Israelis have targets, and they shoot children, they shoot journalists. They're intentional. They are Murder Incorporated, and the United States supports them to the bloody hilt. So none of this would have happened without the Biden administration, with Kamala Harris, who, by the way, has not said a single word about Palestine since the election. The Democrats realized their loyalty to Israel was more important than their care for the United States. And that's just the very day. Bernie Sanders, who as a senator could actually put a hold on Israel's appropriation, as a few years ago, Rand Paul, the Republican, stopped a $32 billion appropriation for more than a year to go to Israel. Did you ever hear about that? No, our movement ignored it. In 1991, George Herbert Walker Bush went to the American people to say why he was going to stop a $10 billion loan guarantee to Israel. And he told the Americans, there's 1,000 lobbyists in Capitol Hill against little old me. And then he told the American people exactly how much money each Israeli was getting from the U.S. government. And the polls afterward, even weeks afterward, showed that there were more Americans wanted money sent to the former Soviet Union than to Israel. 6 months later, only 46% of the American public wanted to support Israel. Now what happened? Noam Chomsky, who denies the power of the lobby, described Bush's statement and appearance, which cost him the election, as little more than raising his lip or eyebrow, and showed how weak the Israeli lobby was. Chomsky has been, and I've written about that, a tool of the Israel lobby because he dismisses their power and says they go through an open door. And so the lobby has no power because they're doing simply, the U.S. is doing simply what the lobby wants them to do. And it's not a lobby, it's a 7,000-room hotel. So lobby, they don't have to tell the government what to do. The government has already been told what to do. It's their agenda. Now, something else that's critical to understanding American politics. In 2010, a man named Sheldon Adelson. How many have heard of Sheldon Adelson? Okay. Sheldon Adelson started a free paper in Israel called Israel Hayom, which means Israel Today. And he started it to defend and support Benjamin Netanyahu. Who's heard of him? Oh, okay. What he said, which has been on YouTube ever since, is a statement that if the Democratic Party really cared about the United States and didn't suck up to Israel, they would have had Trump defeated easily. Adelson said, and you can still see it, just Google, Adelson apologizes, that he says, unfortunately, I served in the uniform of the U.S. Army and not in the Israeli Defense Forces, as did my wife and my daughter and my son, who I hope grows up to be a sniper. Excuse me. Now, if American servicemen, their families, people, whatever their politics, who had brothers, sons, and fathers die in American wars as bad as they were, would see Sheldon Adelson, who 5 years later would hold 2 auditions to determine who would be the Republican candidate for president in Las Vegas. If they saw this son of a bitch named Sheldon Adelson, who cared nothing for the American people or anybody but the Jewish people and Israel, which he says, I support Israel, Israel's in my heart. Now, if Americans who lost loved ones or served in the U.S. military had seen that video, which is, you can see when on your phone today right now, do you think the American Republican Party people would have voted to elect somebody who was supported with $250 million from a self-confessed traitor? But Israel is a country that loyalty or Zionism is primarily to Israel and not to the country where people are born in. So there's an operation called Birthright Israel. Sheldon Adelson funded that. But it's supported by the organized Jewish community, which is all Zionist. And what is their job? Their job is to take young American Jews who have absolutely no relationship with anything connected with Palestine and make them believe that their homeland is, and their birthright is Israel. And so what happens, you have young American Jews who will not serve in the U.S. military going over willingly and happily to kill Palestinians. May all of them come home in body bags. No forgiveness for that. But this is what we're dealing with, and nobody says anything. Now, Stephen said several times, stop U.S. aid to Israel. Now, imagine this. There has never been a campaign in the United States to stop U.S. aid to Israel. We hear about boycotts. We didn't have had a single boycott of hummus, of Sabra hummus. which will allow American shoppers to go into stores from grocery outlet to Safeway and so on, and tell the manager, we don't want you selling Sabra hummus. People should not be expected to go on to a website to find what products they should boycott. We want people to know that Israel's doing genocide in Gaza, and their products should not be on the shelves of stores. And you go and you tell the manager, we want Sabra hummus off the shelves, and we're not going to boycott you. We're going to do informational pickets out in front of your market for you to go and ask the manager, stop selling Sabra hummus. We've never had that. Some individual people may have done that, but there's never been a national campaign. But imagine why we have never had a national campaign to stop U.S. aid to Israel. We had, back in the 80s, we had a plan, stop arming the Contras. Stop 15 million a day going to the Contras. 15 million a year. 15 million a day at that time was going to Israel. And we've never had a campaign because there are people who infiltrated our movement who were against doing that. So divestment is great. It takes a long time to get something divested. There'll be no more Palestine if we wait on divestment. And still, there's no campaign, even today, to stop U.S. aid to Israel. You do not hear people saying it in speeches, stop U.S. aid to Israel. Stop U.S. aid to Israel. Everybody's taxes is paying for genocide. You got to stop that. We're all culpable. That's if you pay taxes. Anyway, the thing about Palestinian journalists and why they've been targeted, because they are witnesses to genocide. And you have an American journalist going over there, and you don't hear them complaining. You don't hear anyone on NPR, the unctuous Scott Simon on Saturday mornings, never says anything that indicates any sympathy or empathy with the people who have been died in Palestine. And the world is seeing this. It's incredible. And so I just want to say, we need to remind everybody that they are enabling, they are culpable, that both political parties are the same. You have a handful of people, relative handful in Congress, who have opposed that, but you have all these campuses where people opposing genocide have no First Amendment rights. That's the power of the Zionists in the United States, and it's been the power for many years. It's just gotten worse. And we have to stop that power, but we cannot take any excuses for not doing it. People say, well, we have to think about local issues. Well, you have to think about local issues, but if your vote is for a Democrat like where I live, Jared Huffman, who's a congressman from the Sauce Leader to the border, who refuses to take a position against aid to Israel. And he's been over there, and he comes up with every kind of excuse. You can't go into a public meeting, like some friends did up there, and try to argue with him when he has the mic. You have to make it impossible for him to meet, because he is no longer working for them, he's working for the state of Israel. So thank you all very much. Remember, free Palestinian journalists, stop free Palestine, stop killing Palestinian journalists, and tell the truth to the American people. And should I tell you, I have to say something. Steve here, who's responsible for me being here and for giving us the idea of the Labor Committee on the Middle East back in '87. He, at a Labor Council meeting, he brought up an issue that there was going to be a $100 a plate breakfast for Nancy Pelosi, who became a U.S. congressperson because she promised to be a voice for Israel in Congress. I have all the documentation. And so Steve said there's going to be a $100 a plate boycott, a $100 a plate breakfast for Pelosi. Let's boycott it and have a picket line. And so the Labor Council people there approved it. What they didn't know, who was the host of the breakfast? The Labor Council. And so the leaders of our revolutionary organizations, Jeff Mackler, Socialist Action, Mike Eisinger of the Communist Party, and Dick Becker, Party of Socialism, Liberation, and whatever they want to be next week, all sent emails to the head of the Labor Council, was Jimmy Herman at that time? In any case, opposing the boycott, opposing the protest, and Mackler tried to stop it. So I gave the emails to Alexander Coburn, the columnist, and he wrote a column criticizing them. And of course, Mackler, the great revolutionary, had to attack Coburn for supporting the right wing. But that's what we're dealing with, and they have been in bed, all three of those parties, with Nancy Pelosi since the beginning, and could say that nobody running against her has a chance when the so-called voices of the phony left will not come out and oppose Pelosi. One more other thing I have to say, I'm forgetting it, but Steve has been doing this work. It's a thankless task because so many fake anti-Zionists oppose it that I have to say I attribute him. We go back together 1985 when there was going to be a major march down Market Street starting over here, and it was not, Israel was now occupying Lebanon for over a year. They had a meeting at SCIU at Golden Gate. And I went down there. I didn't know Steve. Steve and a few other people were there to say no U.S. intervention in the Middle East as a platform demand. I had a Lebanese friend who at that time was a programmer for KPFA and doing more for Palestine than anybody else. But since Israel was occupying Lebanon, she wanted it to be on the agenda. But they wouldn't let her speak. They had one of their stooges, I call him Carl Fenimore, at one end of the aisle and another one at the other end of the aisle, so Tina could not get up and out of the aisle to go and speak for Lebanon. And Palestinian friends there, I looked at their faces and they supported it, but publicly they couldn't afford to go against the main so-called left groups that supported them or said they did. In any case, in '88, there was another march, and we had exposed their leading spy, the Anti-Defamation League in the United States, who tried to join our labor committee in the Middle East and came to Steve's house for the first meetings. I got information through the mail that this guy who did that, named Roy Bullock, was a spy for the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, and had been so for 25 years. So Steve and I met him at the coffee house on Mission Street at Clarion Alley, and we questioned him about his interest in the Palestinians. And he said, well, I had a brother who worked in Saudi Arabia. Well, and I said, I understand you have, around the country, you are going to various Palestinian events. How come? He said, well, I'm an art dealer, and I just happen to be in those cities when these events take place. And I'll give you proof. And he gave me the names of 2 art dealers, their phone numbers and addresses, for me to call to verify his story. I put that piece of paper away, but Steve and I believed this guy was an agent for the ADL. We tried to tell various members of the Solidarity Movement, the left, what he was. They didn't want to hear it. What happens in '88, just the next year, there's going to be another march down Market Street, which again, Mackler stopped the meeting that would have put the Palestinian on the agenda in the first 4 months of the Intifada. But labor didn't want that. And here I see making a speech on the street in a pickup is Carl Fenimore, and who is holding his microphone? was a spy for the ADL. They had welcomed in as a volunteer. We had started a committee called the Emergency Committee on the Middle East, or for Palestine. We had 3,000 signatures, and I sent them certified letter into the office of the mobilization. And there is Roy Bullock, the spy, entering every one of them into the ADL files, so all these people will learn that they were listed in the ADL files as a member of a committee that never met. But this is what we've been dealing with internally. So no lies about Palestine. Free Palestine. Stop the aid to Israel. Every American is paying for it. Every American is culpable. And that's at the noon hour. I'll end there saying, free Palestine. Tell the truth about the genocide in Palestine that the United States and both our political parties are supporting. Thank you very much.
Free Palestine! Stop murdering Palestinian journalists! Stop murdering Palestinian journalists! Stop U.S. aid to Israel! Stop U.S. aid to Israel! Now, I'm a member of the CWA and the News Guild and the Pacific Media Workers Guild, and I want to say that journalists in not just Palestine, but in the United States are threatened. Journalists are being fired by Trump for reporting on different issues. And the rise of fascism in this country is a danger to the entire working class, to all people, all democratic rights. Trump wants to shut down PBS and NPR. Now the unions, NABIT, and the unions you think would be concerned about that. You think would be mobilizing their members. There was a rally on Saturday, and there could have been a lot of people there. I mean, the fact of the matter is the unions are not mobilizing their membership. We're facing a fascist attack on the working class. We need to organize our union members, our brothers and sisters, and educate them about Project 2025, and educate them about fascism, because that is what we're facing. We have a fascist government. And the unions can stop imperialist wars. The unions can have a general strike. They can stop military cargo to Israel. This is what the Palestinian General Federation Union of Gaza has called for. They've called for a general strike on May Day against U.S. military aid to Israel and for the workers in this country who face destruction. The attack on Medicaid, the attack on Social Security, the attack on all kinds of working class people is what we're facing. And I want to add that U.S. government, the U.S. government, the CIA, and the AFL-CIO have been involved in overthrowing governments. They overthrew the government in Chile of Allende with the AFL-CIO. The AFL-CIO Solidarity Center, which has now been shut down by Trump, which had a budget of $70 million a year. Imagine the AFL-CIO Solidarity Center is getting $70 million a year from the U.S. government. What are they doing getting $70 million? Why would the U.S. government give $70 million a year to the AFL-CIO Solidarity Center? The reason is they were doing the bidding of the United States. We need real solidarity with the workers in Palestine, the workers in Chile, the workers in Turkey. Our next speaker is Mehmet. He has been a longtime activist of solidarity with workers in Turkey and solidarity with workers in Palestine. So welcome, Mehmet.
Thank you for coming here today. We are transitioning to a regime called fascism. But this fascism is not only the product of Trump. Our current system, capitalism, needs fascism. That's why the United States needs Israel to kill babies, to attack anybody who is sitting on top of oil in the world. And it is not a surprise that Israel has killed more journalists than World War I and World War II combined. This is not democracy. This is not democracy. If anybody starts to talk about this, the TV stations are shut. The funding is taken away. Journalists are imprisoned. This is not only happening here, but throughout the world, because capitalism itself is in crisis, and it needs an iron fist on the people to stop their resistance. Palestinians are one part of this resistance. They are not abandoning their own country from invasion, illegal invasion, and illegal occupation of Israel, a U.S. puppet created by Europe to be in the Middle East. One of the supporters of Israel is, many people may think this is a surprise, but it is Turkey. Turkey has played both sides of the fence, helping Israel, while they are talking about helping the Palestinians. Turkish cargo ships continuously keep on supporting Israel, taking arms to them, taking food, water. So, and any journalist that writes about this gets into trouble in Turkey. You cannot talk about this. You cannot write about this. TV stations are shut down because Erdogan's own son is complicit in trading with the genocidal Israel. We need to put a stop to this, not only in the United States, but in Turkey, in Israel, in other parts of the world, in Africa, in Asia. If you want to see what the CIA money does in buying TV stations, in buying your slaves to promote your side, just look at the other side of the road. Falun Dafa received many thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars from CIA. They live on the CIA money, and CIA money causes this. How come our CIA gives money to a so-called religious organization? They have the banner saying they are for truth. Really? Tell us, what do you say about the Palestinian journalists who write about the truth and get blown to pieces? CIA money buys you that. They are not for truth. Anybody who talks about the truth is punished by the United States, by Israel, by Turkey, by other imperialist-dominated countries. We have to fight fascism. Fascism is upon us. NPR and all the other outlets that were already biased against the Palestinians are being taken away one by one. Today, the British BBC writes about the boat that got bombed by Israel carrying food to starving Palestinians. And the news just says a boat going to Gaza was attacked by drones. Who the fuck were attacking the ship? Not a word. Like not a word across the street about the murdered Palestinian journalists. Turkey itself has 130 journalists serving in prison because they expose the truth. We gotta be careful on looking at the international law, especially against the corporations and the tech giants that Europe fought for privacy. Turkish government, with support from the US government, is now using that privacy laws to prevent journalists writing about the corruption of Erdogan, his family, and the other top-ranking officials. They are stealing millions, and there are documents about this, but nobody is allowed to publish this because the government says it's privacy. You are just exposing private information about people. This is the country, a NATO country. This is the country that provides all the ammunition to Israel, all the food to Israel so that they can kill more babies. But that money comes directly from the United States. That is what feeds those. CIA admits that they are helping the fallen Dafa. It's in their website. They get paid to do that. But they will not talk about Palestine. They will not talk about how much they received from the spy agency of the United States of America. CIA admits to it. We give money to them, it says. This is what happens. This is what happens to, even in the United States, when Gary Webb writes about the narcotic dealings of the US government, he's bumped off. When Mumia Abu Jamal talks about the corruption, when he talks about how the black people are being treated, he gets bumped off. This is capitalist democracy, which we don't even have anymore. We are passing to fascism, and unless we get our shit together, unless we get together to fight fascism at all levels, unless we declare our independence from both the Republicans and the Democrats and fight it independently, we are not going to win. We must preserve our independence. We must preserve our journalist ways to expose the ways and means of both capitalist parties so that we can expose what is going on in Palestine. Thank you very much.
Stop U.S. aid to Palestine.
I just want to make an announcement regarding Labor for Palestine National Network, an entity that has been fighting for Palestine and in solidarity with Palestinian General Federation of Trade Unions for several decades now, has put out an announcement and is asking the General Workers Union of Malta to take a stand to defend the Flotilla for Freedom. The Flotilla for Freedom is a flotilla that is carrying dozens of humanitarian aid workers, as well as the son of a Palestinian man who was on board that same flotilla in 2010 when it got raided by Israel. It got raided by Israel and 9 people were killed. That was in 2010. Now, Israel sent drones to set it on fire. And the Malta government is not giving safe harbor to this flotilla. It's an unarmed humanitarian aid boat destined for Gaza to give it humanitarian aid. It's a non-military boat made of civilians, humanitarian workers. And it was attacked by Israel, which is a violation of international law. So we're asking people to contact the government of Malta to ask them to please, please, please give safe harbor to the flotilla called Conscience. Also, I wanted to expand a bit about how we got here regarding this lack of press freedom around the world. Do people remember Julian Assange? He was basically, because he was putting out information with WikiLeaks and exposing the CIA and exposing a lot of these different agencies and governments for their attacks on freedom all over the world and their business dealings. None of the information that WikiLeaks put out has ever been discredited in any way. All of the information that WikiLeaks put out was correct. He exposed the Hillary Clinton as well for being a billionaire genocider that attacked Libya and bombed dozens of countries, bombed 7 countries actually, together, then later with Obama bombed 7. So how do we get here? Julian Assange was being accused, falsely accused of espionage for printing truthful information. He was being falsely accused by the Democratic government of the United States. He's not even a U.S. citizen, and he was put in jail by a third country, the UK, which he's not even a citizen of either. Before that, he had to be seeking exile in the Ecuadorian embassy, and the UK went into the Ecuadorian embassy violating international law and basically kidnapped him and put him in one of the worst prisons in the UK. The Democrats tried to falsely smear him, saying that he was a supporter of Trump just because he was put out information, bad information about Hillary Clinton. And they blamed him for Hillary Clinton losing the election, which was bullshit. Now, who stood up for Julian Assange? Which journalist actually stood up for Julian Assange in the US? He was an international journalist, an independent journalist from WikiLeaks, a publication, and he was jailed by the UK, and actually, even before that, he was targeted by satellites, by the US satellites all around the world. For wherever he went, he would be targeted. And they accused him of supposedly supporting the Trump administration. Now, the Democrats, if they really wanted to have impeached Trump, like they made a big hoorah about it, accusing him of Russiagate and all that crap, if they really had wanted to do that legally, they could have done it in a heartbeat. There was already precedent set by the Andrew Johnson impeachment trial of incitement to riot, which Trump had already committed against Congress members. There was already precedent when Nixon fired Archibald Cox, the Attorney General who was investigating him. After Trump fired Comey, that would have been obstruction of justice, an impeachable offense. But no, the Democratic Party chose to do that, to use Russiagate in order to further their interests and think that they would be able to continue with this attack on free speech and journalism by trying to link Julian Assange with Trump, and then Trump with Russiagate. Let's make it perfectly clear. The Democratic Party is responsible for Trump winning. Let's make it very clear. They're responsible, and they are two sides of the same coin. One of them steals out of your pocket slowly and smiles in your face, while the other one says, fuck that, I'm going to take it anyways, and you can go die in a corner. But they're both from the billionaire class. How many members of Congress have less than $1 million to their name? How many members of Congress have less than $1 million to their name? Have you ever thought about that? Those are the people that are representing us. And now everybody's shocked that this fascist Trump is jailing judges. How many Democrats allowed these same judges to be approved by the Senate hearings, confirmation hearings? They voted to confirm a lot of these judges that now are on Trump's side. But there's judges that are being arrested because they're not standing for that. And while Trump was jailing and putting away children in the southern border, guess what company was surveilling that border? Elbit Systems, an Israeli company. And we have people within the Democratic Party, people within the San Francisco Labor Council who are outright Zionists, but who pretend to be friends of immigrants, yet they're supporters of Israel. And now everybody's worried about deportations when they should have been worried about that long time ago. Now it's not only the undocumented that are being attacked, it's legal permanent residents and naturalized citizens, and who knows if citizens are next. Just like in Nazi Germany. People didn't speak up until it was too fucking late. So please, support independent journalism. Check out pacificafightback.org for more information about independent journalism. And if you are a member of your union, you have an obligation to speak up in your union conventions, and fight for a general strike to get rid of fascism.
Thank you, brothers and sisters.